All right. Conference play is heating up, and we're going to cover it all from the SEC to the Big Ten to the Big 12 and the ACC. Now, my plan is to go by conference and say what happened as expected, what were the best games, and then preview what is lined up for tomorrow. If you find the content worthy, then please give it a like as well, share it. So if you think it's good, then show other people or let people know by giving it the thumbs up. All right, let's get into this. Let's start with the SEC. As expected, Texas bullied Ole Miss. My overall take is Ole Miss seems like that team that can get close against the good teams, but just not over the top. They'll play competitive, but when they go against somebody that has really strong bigs, they are going to struggle. Taylor and Oldacre just beat teams up on the inside, and Texas just strangles people with their defense. South Carolina, as expected, took down Vandy 84-63. Full Wiley went off. Chloe Kitts had a good game. And Vandy tightened it up towards the end, but South Carolina was always going to win that game. Then the best game of the day in the SEC, I would say, was Kentucky versus Oklahoma. It went back and forth. Both teams struggled with their shot. Kentucky was 40% effective field goal shooting versus Oklahoma that was 34%. Surprisingly, Oklahoma did better at holding on to the ball. That's been an issue they've had all season. But in this game, only 13% of Oklahoma's possessions ended in turnover versus Kentucky, that 21% of their possessions ended in turnover. I thought at the end, like when Kentucky needed Amore to make plays, and she couldn't do it. A side note, Reagan Beer's dad, that's the thing that stood out to me. What a man. I mean, if he had an axe on his shoulder, does he look like a classic lumberjack guy or a truck driver? I loved him. And what a whistle on the guy.
See Reagan Beer's dad starting his celebration.
Like, I could never put my fingers in my mouth and blow a whistle, and I saw him doing it, and you could hear it all throughout the stadium. Anyway, I digress. The last game was LSU versus Florida. LSU just beat up on Florida. They just bullied them. Anissa Mara had a you must respect me game. If I'm not MVP, I will crush you. Going for 36 points on 15 of 21 shooting. By the way, bad job by Back to Sports. I was talking about people that got screwed on the MVP, and I left her out. I apologize, Anissa. And I'll mention it now because this sets up for tomorrow. Fantastic. Texas versus LSU. And we'll get into the numbers in a second, but the story is Anissa Moro versus Madison Booker, who is the real MVP of the SEC. And it gives me a chance to show Olajuwon versus David Robinson. Nothing better than David Robinson getting the NBA MVP, and then Dream just goes into San Antonio's house and dominates. And I am sure that is what LSU is looking to do tomorrow, and Anissa Maro. When we look at the core conference numbers for the year, offense is fairly similar. Texas scores 107 points per 100 versus LSU that's 104 per 100. A big difference, or a little bit of a difference, is offensive rebounding. Texas is slightly better, but LSU is no slouch. With Texas at 42%, LSU at 41%. The big difference between these teams is defense. Texas is only giving up 85 points per 100 possession versus LSU that is 94 points per 100 possession. In addition, effective field goal shooting percentage, Texas holds opponents to 41%, where LSU opponents are shooting 45%. The other one, both teams surprisingly give up offensive boards. So opponents grab 33% of the available offensive rebounds versus Texas, and that is 33% versus LSU as well. Texas causes more turnovers with their opponents' possessions, 22.5% of them ending in turnover. That's a little bit lower for LSU at 19.4%. Now Texas is slightly more handsy, as 31% of their opponent's possessions end in a free throw versus 29% for LSU. So looking at the numbers, you would think Texas would win, but again, Anissa Morrow, maybe she will have extra motivation and be desperate to show the SEC who the real MVP is. Either way, it should be fun. Now, the other side or the other game, SEC, will be Oklahoma versus South Carolina. Has Oklahoma learned their lessons of the past? Will they be able to hold on to the ball and not get bullied like the last time they played South Carolina and got beat up pretty good? Looking at the numbers or the conference numbers, South Carolina was pretty dominant all year. So, offensive rating, they're 114 versus Oklahoma, that is 103. And efficient field goal shooting percentage, they both shoot the ball pretty good at 51% and 52%. Offensive rebounding, similar. Turnovers, that was the big issue for Oklahoma during conference play. And have they learned their lessons? They better have, because if you look at South Carolina's defense, it's pretty ugly. Their defensive rating is they only give up 81 points per 100 possession. That is 97th percentile versus Oklahoma that gives up 94 points per 100 possession. Then effective field goal shooting percentage, they hold opponents in conference play to under 40% at 37.8. Again, opponents are pretty comfortable shooting against Oklahoma at 46%. Offensive rebounding, that's the interesting one. South Carolina does give up a few offensive rebounds as they only get 31%, or their opponents grab 31% of the offensive rebounds versus Oklahoma that only gives up 27%. Turnovers cause, clearly that would be South Carolina causes more with 18% of their opponents ending in turnover versus 17 for Oklahoma. The last one is the free throws, or who's handsy, and that is clearly Oklahoma. As their opponents, they wind up on the line 30% of their possessions end of them going on the line versus only 21% for South Carolina. Now, I think South Carolina will dominate this game, but I'm hoping for that it turns into an interesting game and that it gets tight at the end, as I want to see how South Carolina reacts to that. If it goes into the fourth quarter and it's a tight game, that's what I want to see. Now let's move on to the Big Ten. USC took down Indiana. They didn't look great. They won 84-79, but essentially that's a road game because it's in Indiana. So you knew they would be fired up. Marshall was out sick, so Howell started. The other one that I thought was interesting, if you looked at the box score, Samuel got 14 minutes at point guard versus Heckle 5 minutes. I've been pointing to that a lot during the season as Samuel's defensive numbers are better, and wondering if Gottlieb is going in that direction. In the UCLA game, she went to Samuels in the second half, and I reckon that just tightens up their defense if you have Samuels there guarding the ball versus if you have Heckle on ball, and I think they have enough offense where they don't need Heckle out there. The other as expected game, UCLA bullied Nebraska. We expected that. That's not really the question on UCLA. We know they can beat up on teams that aren't as athletic or as big as they are. They crushed them on the boards 39-27. They got 16-8 on offensive rebounds. The question with UCLA, they only shot 20%. London Jones, yeah, she was 0 for 6 in this game. Like the last month, she has not been shooting the ball real well. Michigan took out Maryland 98-71, so they did it fairly handily. I did not watch this game. The only thing that sticks out to me is Sellers did not appear to have a good game. She only got 19 minutes and 2 points. It's not a good way to help your draft stock, but I haven't watched Maryland or Michigan in a while. The other, I guess I would say the best game in the Big Ten was Iowa and Ohio State. It went down to the wire. Stolke had a chance to win it at the end with a jumper from the side, but it just went in and out. By the way, I'm not sure who was the most improved in the Big Ten in terms of player awards. I don't know if they even give that out. But in my book, it would be Cody McMahon. She has developed a three-pointer, and that's a game changer in how I view her. I love it when players develop shots throughout their college career because it shows that they've been putting in and they made it work basically. And it really is transformational for her game if she can consistently hit threes. And this season, she is shooting 37% from the three-point range, which is a game changer. Now, the Big Ten games tomorrow, we've got Southern Cal versus Michigan. This is good because when they first met, I believe Swords was out with a calf injury, so it'll be good that she'll be able to play against them. I want to see both her and Hobbs go against Juju and Kennedy Smith. The offensive numbers between Southern Cal and Michigan are similar, with the offensive rating for Southern Cal being 106 points per 100 and Michigan 103. The big difference between these teams, well, one you can see is offensive rebounding, where Michigan only gets 29% versus USC and they're 33%. The other major difference is defense, where Southern Cal is holding teams to 84 points per 100 versus Michigan, that they're holding opponents to 99 points per 100. And then effective field goal shooting percentage, USC holds opponents to 40% versus Michigan, where teams are very comfortable shooting 49% effective field goal shooting percentage. Now, the other game is UCLA and Ohio State. Again, their numbers, UCLA's numbers are better, but the question is, it was tight, I believe, the last time these teams played. The question is, will UCLA be able to hold on and control the ball? So, offensive numbers, UCLA's offensive ratings 110 per 100 versus Ohio State, that's 103. UCLA crushes on the boards, 37% offensive rebounds, their misses, versus only 24% for Ohio State. And then defensive numbers, UCLA giving up 90 points per 100 versus Ohio State 93 per 100. And then, as I mentioned, I think the big one will be turnovers, where UCLA doesn't cause many turnovers, 16%, which is 12th percentile, versus Ohio State that causes 22% of their opponent's possessions end in turnover. UCLA has had a turnover problem, but if you look at their overall numbers in conference play, it's not too bad at 17% of their possessions end in turnover. That's more than Ohio State, that only 15% of their possessions end in turnover. I am hoping this one goes chalk. I want to see a three-peat of Southern Cal versus UCLA, but we'll see what happens. I think if there's an upset, I think this is the more likely upset between these two teams, between the UCLA Ohio State matchup and the Southern Cal versus Michigan matchup, in my opinion. But to be determined, I probably just put the jinx on Southern Cal. All right, let's move on to the next conference. Let's go ACC. As expected, Notre Dame took out Cal 64-73. It's a little bit closer than expected. Hannah Hidalgo got back on track, going for 25 points on 9 of 15 shooting. Miles was a bit down this game, only 14 points on 4 for 14 shooting, and she was only 1 of 5 from three-point range. The other player for Notre Dame that needs to get back on track is Maddie Westbelt. She went for 6 points on 3 of 10 shooting. She was 0 for 3 from three-point range. And just overall, it just seems like she's struggling to get her legs back since coming back from injury. Now, I think Duke taking out Louisville was as expected. They handled them pretty easily, 61-48. Louisville reminds me of Ole Miss. Now, I think Ole Miss is better than Louisville, but there's sort of that similar thing. When it's a tougher game, I don't expect them to win. I just don't think they have that next level. I don't know what it is. I don't trust them in a tough game, but I wish I could describe it, but that's just the way I feel. Now, the other two ACC games were better. UNC got Florida State. Utsby and Kelly were back, and Lattimore, I would say, was off. She only went for 13 points on 3 of 14 shooting. Timpson from Florida State, she continues to go well. She went for another 15 points on 7 of 15 shooting. Georgia Tech versus NC State. Now, that was one of the closer games. It went down to the wire. NC State down by 1 point, and then freshman Carnegie, she dribbled out the ball. She didn't get a last shot, unfortunately for her. I feel bad for Carnegie. She's had a good year, but yeah, freshmen, they make that mistake. Better she make it there than in the NCAA tournament. Now let's take a look at the conference season numbers. So it'll be Notre Dame versus Duke. This should be a good matchup. If you look for the season, Notre Dame has a better offense at 111 per 100 possession versus Duke 103. But then across the board, it's fairly similar. Defense, Duke has them a little bit on defense. So they're only giving up 79 points per 100 possession versus Notre Dame at 82 per 100 possession. Effective field goal shooting as well. Duke teams are shooting a little bit better at Duke against Duke at 41% versus Notre Dame at 39%. Offensive rebounds, Duke gives up a few more offensive rebounds at 31% versus 27% for Notre Dame. But they're close, and Duke causes more turnovers, 27% versus Notre Dame's 19%. By the way, if you look at their numbers over the last 5 games, their numbers are even closer. So, in terms of offense, Notre Dame's at 101 per 100 possession versus Duke, that's at 98 per 100 possessions. So, this game, I think, will be really, really tight. I still think Notre Dame will win it, but yeah, it has potential. If I was going to put, I would think this is the upset potential. I could see Notre Dame being surprised and going down. Now, at the other side of the bracket, you've got NC State versus North Carolina. NC State's numbers for the conference play are much better. Their offense at 110 per 100 possessions is pretty potent versus North Carolina. At times, they struggle to score at 99 per 100 possession. Then across the board from there, it's fairly equal. Defense is fairly equal at 92 per 100 for NC State versus 91 per 100 for North Carolina. And an effective field goal shooting percentage very similar. So everything. The only other difference is NC State doesn't cause many turnovers at 16% versus North Carolina. Their opponent's possessions 19% end in turnover. As well, NC State does a good job of keeping their hands out as they only put opponents on the line 17% of the time. Now, the final conference is the Big 12. I'm going to go fast through this. I don't want this video to be 20 minutes, all right? So, because I want to get it out tonight. So, TCU took down Colorado 69-62. Their lineup, their starting lineup is so good. Prince, Hunter, Connor, Van Lith. I just don't know about their defense, but yeah. And then West Virginia took out Kansas State 73-69. Lee didn't play in that game. That's the key to Kansas State. When will Lee come back? Will she be able to come back? That's a big deal for them. On the other side, Baylor took out Iowa State 69-63. It's sort of a disappointing season for Iowa State. I mean, they have gotten 22 wins. They've gone 22-11. I just thought they would do a little bit better. I don't know if they scheduled too hard and sort of wore themselves out before they got into conference play. Oklahoma State took out Texas Tech in a close game, 62-59. I haven't even seen highlights of this. It obviously was a close game. But let's move on and look forward to tomorrow. So you have TCU versus West Virginia, and it's a boxer versus a puncher. TCU is the offensive juggernaut, the San Diego Chargers, and West Virginia is the 85 Chicago Bears on defense. So it should make for a fun matchup, but I think TCU will get them. But in terms of the numbers, TCU scores 116 per 100 possession versus West Virginia that's 100. And then TCU's effective field goal shooting percentage, God, 55%, offensive rebounding, 34% of their misses, and turnovers are low as well at only 16%. Those are all better than what West Virginia puts up. But then defensive rating, TCU gives up 93 points per 100 possession versus West Virginia that only gives up 81 points. Teams shoot well versus West Virginia. So teams shoot 46 effective field goal shooting percentage versus 42 versus TCU. I think that's basically if people break West Virginia's pressure, then they have a better chance. West Virginia obviously presses teams hard, and they cause 28% of their opponent's possessions end in turnover, which is only 14% for TCU. Again, this is going to be offense versus defense. West Virginia is going to try to make it a messy, muddy game, and TCU is just going to outscore them. That would be the plan. The other game, Baylor versus Oklahoma State. So Baylor's numbers are better across the board. Essentially, Baylor, their offensive rating, they score 107 points per 100 possession. Oklahoma State only scores 99. Efficient field goal shooting percentage, 50 versus 47. Offensive rebound percentage, 33 versus 31%. And then turnovers are less at 15 versus 18%. And the one they don't get to the line as much at 24% versus Oklahoma State at 36%. And then defense, Baylor's slightly not as good on defense. That's not good English, but that's fine. Baylor gives up 89 points per 100 versus Oklahoma State that gives up 88 points per 100 possession. Effective field goal shooting percentage, 44 to 43. That's interchangeable. Offensive rebounding within a percentage of each other. Same thing with causing turnovers. So these two are really similar. Baylor's a little bit more handsy, putting opponents on the line 32% of the time versus Oklahoma State only 26%. And there you have it. Those are the games for tomorrow as well. I believe the Big East gets started, or at least UConn starts playing tomorrow. I'll try to cover that. We'll see how we go. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. All right, have a great night.